We don't hate that Bridget is a T, let's say. But if I see one more merch piece of Bridget, I'm going to go insane. I have gone from Bridget is neat to please shut the F up about Bridget. I don't care about brisket, basket, bucket. Shut up. Shut the F up, because 98% of the content I see about Guilty Gear outside the game is Bridget. I don't care about her. Also, the matchup is bad, let's say. Effort, yo, this guy's going in. Effort mix and the fast big normals, yuck. And that's what happens when your character gets hijacked by activists. It becomes about the representation of the character rather than the merit of the character themselves. So Guilty Gear Strive is getting an anime. Now, before I move on to the Bridget controversy of his hijacked backstory some of my subscribers made me aware of, I'll just speak on my brief experience with this game. Now, this anime I was somewhat interested in. Not in a Villain Saga Season 3 anticipating way, but because I played Strive casually, with my girl Amelia Rage as my main, shout out to her and them curves. But since Strive was the only installment of this series I played, I knew nothing of the lore or backstory of these characters, except for Amelia, with her being from Russia. I mean, the hat kind of gives it away. So being ignorant and a casual to this series, I was looking forward to some cool action, and that's about it. No deep story, because fighting game adaptations usually lack in that area, which is understandable. People want to see fights from a fighting game. Plus, the last time I gave a fighting game anime a chance was Grand Blue Fantasy, and that anime was kind of trash. I think by the third or fourth episode, I said, okay, that's it for me, and I dropped it. A fighting game that had a good anime adaptation, in my opinion, is Street Fighter the movie. Shout out to the famous Chun-Li shower scene, and her versus Vega fight went hard. They really did a good job with that. They kept the movie mature with the violence, the blood, deadly. If that released today, they probably will water it down a lot. And the series as well, which I think many people don't know about, but has one of the best openings and intros ever. I remember me and my brother used to watch an episode every morning on Stars before going to school, and that show gave you what you wanted. Some cool fights, Ryu and Ken traveling the world, meeting all the other characters. Nothing too deep, but highly recommend if you're interested. Mortal Kombat, even though that's American, at least we got a good movie from that. Cool fights and music, especially Reptile vs. Liu Kang, one of my favorites. Reptile. The sequel was ass though. So that's about it, what I was expecting from Strive. Some good action with a minor story to carry the plot along. Oh, fun fact, when I was in Japan last August, I actually became real cool with a guy from Italy who's actually an ex-pro fighting game player in Guilty Gear. Real cool dude, and actually while we were in Japan, he attended a fighting game tournament and won his first time going. And I said, yo, you gotta take me with you the next time you go. So next week I went with him to like this underground lair where the tournament was held, and was blown away, man. I never thought I would attend a Japanese fighting game tournament. They had a whole section dedicated to Tekken 8. People were playing Blaze Blue, some other fighting games, and that day they had a whole section carved out for a Guilty Gear Strive tournament. Now, I always thought I was at least borderline intermediate level, but the way these pros play is a little intimidating, I'll admit. And he mained Leo and was flying through friendlies, the competition. I thought, man, this is really cool to watch, an ex-pro fighting game player in action. Now, he didn't win the tournament that day, but he did make winners finals. And the main reason he lost is because he hasn't kept up with the DLC and didn't know the Sin matchup at all. But was still impressive to see him get that far, and he stayed there the whole night to play friendlies, and I left to meet up with some people in Golden Guy to get drunk and do karaoke, which was fun in itself. And we did play each other on a different day in an arcade, and of course he whipped my ass. I think I won like twice, but still a good time. Oh, fun fact, you can actually connect your console controller through USB in this arcade. I just never thought I would see that happen. But now, a couple days ago, I did a community post on this channel about the anime coming out for Guilty Gear, and had some longtime players comment about how Strive is disappointing, the game feels different, it feels heavy to its previous installments, and how people were upset with what they did to Bridget. So I was curious and I asked, wait, what did they do to Bridget? Now, like I said, I didn't know any of the lore or backstories of these characters except for Milia. I would just go into trainer mode, learn combos and my neutral game, and go online and play other players. So when I did some research and learned the backstory of Bridget, I said, oh,
it's a man, baby.
And this is what some players said about this whole situation on this post. Used to play it, then the whole Bridget situation started with activists and tourists saying Bridget from Guilty Gear is a T, let's say for YouTube's sake, when he is not nor never has or will be. His bio says why he cross-dresses. After what Strive did to Bridget, I couldn't give any less of a damn. And considering this goes against all of his character until that point. I was a big fan of old Guilty Gear and other ASW fighters like Blaze Blue. I played Strive for a day and put it down. I'm not a fan of how heavy the game feels. Between the whole Bridget and Testament, I'll hit a hard pass. Been a Guilty Gear fan my entire life, but tourists and fake fans ruined it. Now, Bridget being a dude isn't even my criticism, nor does it seem as these players neither. That doesn't bother me because the backstory is actually pretty good and solid, and you can understand the motivation behind it. So basically, Bridget was born a boy shortly after his twin brother, and the village he was born into has a superstition about male twins, seeing them as a bad omen that will bring misfortune to the village. So whenever this anomaly occurs, the procedure is to unalive the youngest of the male twins born. So the parents who were concerned for their son's safety chose to raise Bridget up to appear as a girl to protect him from the village. Now, that's a very interesting and compelling story. I can understand and believe that. I would actually be interested in following that and seeing that on the screen. It actually sounds like a belief that would be held sometime in history by certain cultures. So I did some light looking into that, and turns out that was true in some cases. Now, continuing. Bridget began to worry for his parents, seeing this facade was beginning to fill them with guilt, like they were forcing him to live as a girl against his will. And no matter how much he tried to ease that guilt, thinking it's okay, I understand the circumstance you was in and trying to protect me, that guilt still remained. So as a solution to all of this, he decides to disprove this superstition of male twins by setting out and becoming extremely good in combat and capturing bounties that would bring significant amount of wealth to the village while presenting and behaving as a man, therefore disproving this belief that male twins is a bad omen, but instead can be very fortunate for the village in return. That is such a good motivation to get behind. That's a very cool backstory. Now, it isn't until Strive that Bridget decides to identify as a girl. Before then, he basically is just a femboy or a crossdresser, a guy who just looks and acts effeminate, sort of like reincarnated as Seventh Prince, I guess. And this sometimes causes confusion with his interactions. Like it says, Johnny tried to come on to him, but later finds out he's a guy and says, hey, don't tell anyone about this. Like, I can see that being a comedic moment. That sounds funny, but I can see how this backstory would be immediately hijacked in modern day by activists. Like when I heard Rama was getting a remake, at first I thought it was getting a live action and was worried because I know they can't wait to retcon that character for obvious reasons. But was relieved it was just getting a remake, but that still hasn't prevented activists from trying to reframe the story of Rama. But I'm dedicating a video to that and how activists are trying to force political identities onto anime characters, so stay tuned for that. So as I said, I'm a casual when it comes to Strive. And as I give my opinion on this, I know I'll receive hate from certain Strive players and activists who will view me as an anti-this or anti-that, which isn't true, but I won't waste my time explaining to people who already have their minds made up. My problem with all of this is when characters or stories get hijacked and retconned, reframed, rewritten to appease and cater to modern day politics. Now, it says the creator himself extended the story to have Bridget identify as a girl for Strive, and something he always intended from the start. And to that, I call bullshit. I don't believe you.
We don't believe you. You need more people.
And I would bet that people who would be on the opposite side of this don't believe that claim either, but will remain cemented in that belief regardless. Now, I don't have any proof of this, any evidence. It's just my pure intuition, reading between the lines of what somebody says, and I'm sure you'll get pro players saying they're cool with this addition to Bridget identifying a certain way in Strive, but that means nothing to me because the wrong opinion on this topic would easily get you banned from Twitch, from events like Evo, which is very important if you're a fighting game player. So a lot of people are muzzled when it comes to this topic, just like Light said.
Human beings are like that, Ryuk. You can bet that everyone would give the politically correct answer.
And people are very trigger happy when it comes to banning people, just like this fighting game player or this player got banned from events just for liking lolly characters or being a fan of certain anime. Now, today, you are starting to see pushback from certain developers, no longer feeling forced to push agendas in their games, some being based and realizing what the player base really wants and not feeling shackled by activists. But this game came out in 2021, so that means the production even started started years earlier, when companies were appealing to that ESG money, that if you have certain social agendas or political representative identities and quotas in your game, you get that good old investment money from BlackRock or whatever. And then you have these consultancy agencies like Sweet Baby Inc. that interfere with the development of your game, acting like mafia, saying, hey, this game lacks diversity. You should include characters with this identity and that background. You would hate to get a bad review, right? Sort of like what they did with Black Myth Wukong, trying to extort them, allegedly. So I wouldn't be surprised if someone approached the curator saying, hey, you should make Bridget this. I mean, his backstory already sets itself up to be that way. Why not? But just say it was your idea and that you had this all planned out from the start. So I wouldn't be surprised if he was pushed or nudged in that direction. Now, here's a thread of many conversations that took place on this topic, and this guy I think gives really good insight. To present the other side of the argument, the best way I can describe it is that it's character development that feels like a retcon. It technically isn't a retcon since it only adds onto the character without changing anything about her past, but it does it in a way that feels completely disconnected from the original character, and that's exactly the same sentiment I got personally. Continuing, I think the main issue is that they introduced a plot line that fundamentally changes how the character is viewed and what the character's main appeal is 20 or so years after she was initially introduced. It doesn't help that this character arc feels nothing like the character that was introduced initially, going through a character arc that wasn't previously foreshadowed and comes completely out of left field if you look at where the character's story was left off. I've heard that this was their plan from the beginning, which I don't personally believe. Okay, I'm just glad I'm not the only one. But if it was, I think it's horrendously bad writing. If they wanted to do some sort of trans story arc, they should have introduced a new character to do it with, or at the very least foreshadow it in her early storylines instead of acting like this was always the way the character was. This is the type of person that speaks out first, that gets all the arrows and rocks flung at them when they come over the hill, but his intention is only to keep the integrity of the fandom intact, but gets hated at first but will be appreciated later down the line when he was one of the first to speak up but got all the backlash. I definitely respect this guy. And this guy gets some really good pushback in this thread against those who say, if you criticize Bridget's new storyline, you just hate T people and basically a phony of some sort. But he gives really good insight in my opinion. And I share his sentiment that my problem with a lot of these things is when a character gets race swapped, gender swapped, or sexual orientation swapped, or in this case added onto to appease activists, they take an already existing established character, in this case almost 2 decades, that fans have grown to love, gotten to know, and all of a sudden are changed overnight. And it's almost like a middle finger to the fans feeling sideswiped, dismissing an audience or fan base that's built in just to appease a new one that's only there for the political representation the character brings rather than the character they already were. That's why I feel sneaky and conniving in a way. And I think it's safe to assume that the anime will over highlight this story in some way, pissing off a lot of Stride players that feel like Bridget's identity has become the sole focus of the game rather than the game itself, which shows in the comments that I read earlier. But that's all I had for this video. Tell me what you think in the comment section below. Are you a fan of this series? Like I said, I already know I'm gonna get a lot of hate on this, but it is what it is. If you haven't already, check out my music on Spotify, link in the description. If you love those Samurai Champloo lo-fi mellow boom bap vibes, then my music is definitely for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Free think. Peace.